everyone, and welcome back to the Secret Sunday session. Today, I'm joined by Nick Bracks, and it is a privilege to have him on today, all the way from New York. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on, as I said, especially knowing that you work in this incredible space around men's mental health and mental health in general. I'm excited to jump in. I'm excited to really start these conversations because I really think that they're ongoing and they're constantly evolving, I feel, in today's society. But yet, I don't think as well there's a lot of clarity. There's a lot of noise, but sometimes we don't have a lot of direction of what these conversations even mean and how to implement them in our lives. So love to get to know you all and your topics and your discussions around this. But firstly, for those people that are not aware who Nick Bracks is, who is he and what is he doing with himself?
Well, I'll try and give you an abbreviated version of that. But I've worked in the mental health wellbeing space for, oh God, probably 15 years now. I sort of fell into it. It wasn't a plan to go down that path. I started off actually originally wanted to be a professional athlete. And then I got injured, and then I was doing a business course, and I fell into it. And it all came about from suffering from anxiety and depression myself. I had grown up in a well-known family where I was the eldest. My dad was the Premier of Victoria from when I was 12 till my early 20s. So that sort of was a very, unique environment to grow up in, and you sort of don't get taught how to navigate that. So I was putting
Mm.
pressure on myself, as were my siblings, where we're being known as, "Hey, you're Steve Brax's son," and you build almost a complex of, "Oh, okay, like so I'm not my own person. I'm second rate compared to my dad." What can I better do something pretty big then to prove myself. And it created this identity sort of crisis for me. And I was channeling that into trying to be an athlete, but that became obsessive, where I was training, 7 hours a day as a 13-year-old kid, stunted my physical development. And, I got results for a while, but then my body broke down. And that's sort of where the problem started. I dropped out of university, started drinking, started abusing alcohol, and went down a really sort of bad path for a number of years. And I mean, looking back, I was pretty lucky to survive it. I mean, I was getting blackout drunk and in all sorts of situations. And yeah, eventually, was able to get the help I needed. And it was a really long process, and got myself sort of just one step at a time, working with a psychologist back at a new university course, not knowing what I wanted to do, not really seeing a future, but just putting one foot in front of the other. And very slowly things opened up, where I ended up being on a reality television show, and getting asked to talk about my story. And that led to then being asked to speak at schools and companies. And then I was terrified, but I went and shared my story and got a really good response. I felt good. It helped me, and it helped. I got all this feedback that it was helping, all of these kids that were hearing it. And that just ended up becoming a passion, where sort of I've, been doing the like running speaking engagements for the last 15 years, and have built sort of a brand around the mental health and getting that message out there. And yeah, anyway, I'm rambling on. And there's another career in entertainment as well, and whatever else. But I'll let you ask me questions.
No, I love it. Lots of different side gigs as you pursue your different passions. Incredible. I firstly do want to touch on, as you said, you were the son of a well-known politician at the time. I think a lot of the time, a lot of us look at that and we see people that are in the media or have a certain status, and we label and we judge and we think, what a life that they have. But in terms of the life that you feel you were living, I know you were quite young, but provide a little insight into like how hard it actually was.
Yeah, and I mean there definitely was privilege as well. And I wouldn't change how I grew up. I think it shapes you into who you become. But yeah, there's that, and there's that side, like you're saying, where people were always looking at me. And I guess that played into that whole identity issue as well, because even whatever you did achieve, a lot of the time people think, oh well, you've had it easy, you're from privilege, you've got all the support in the world, whereas actually the opposite. Your dad's like 24/7 working, trying to be the best dad he can, but he's occupied doing that. Everyone you at school thinks that you've got this amazing life, where the reality is we're still a relatively working class family, and there's an expectation. There's people judging you. Every time I would meet anyone, I'd be paranoid, because I'd be not wanting to just be myself, or I'd be worried about being myself because I'd be thinking, have they got an expectation about how they think I should be? How do they, do they imagine that I'm meant to be more polished than I am, or more accomplished, or that I should be in a certain way? And that coupled with just growing up in that political environment where you just know by virtue of being part of it that, when you go to events, if you make a mistake in public, that could actually become in the media. And I mean, for me, unfortunately, on a number of occasions, it did. I on schoolies ended up actually getting my drink spiked, and almost ending up in hospital, and that got leaked and became a story. And I had a car crash with my best friend where I drunk drove, and that became sort of the biggest story in the country at the time, and things like that. So I think on a psychological level, I honestly wouldn't wish it on anyone. Recently, I did an op-ed for The Age because Peter Dutton's son was caught, I think, with cocaine, or suspected to be cocaine, and he's 18 years old, and not that that's a good thing that he should be doing that, but big story came out of that, and this is a kid who's probably doing something that I don't know, 25% of kids do at some point, and people experiment, but I think it's just not fair to, you shouldn't be putting that on someone who's not asking for it. He's not asking to be a public figure. So, really confusing. And then I guess the other confusing part is my career sort of got shaped through that. And I ended up building my own career as a public figure myself, which probably I wouldn't have gone down that path if it didn't happen. So it's a weird thing where, like I said before, you look back and I'm like, oh, well, if all of these things didn't happen, I probably wouldn't have found this path. I wouldn't have pushed myself to, get into the things that I've pursued and, fallen in love with doing. But yeah, definitely has been anything but easy.
And you can only imagine that how is a young person supposed to survive that and look to healthy coping mechanisms when they're put under that much pressure and stress by, we look at younger generations now and we think they're under so much pressure and all they have is, social media or outside influence or sometimes bad role models where you have a standard to withhold to the whole media and to the whole country. And that pressure on yourself at such a young age. And as you said as well, you weren't obviously a typical family with your dad obviously being away a lot. And did you feel like you did have to sort of prove your way in the family as well, with like your dad not being alone? And obviously, work conversations would have had to be a big thing at the dinner table or during family lunch or whatever that looked like. Did you feel like sometimes, yeah, you just couldn't escape it?
Definitely felt like you couldn't escape it, but also didn't know any different, because that's, like, I mean, for me, yeah, I was 11, 12 years old when he got in, and it was there. He was there till I was 20. So um, it's such a normalized part of your life that you don't really know any different. And you're only learning about life yourself at that point. So you're sort of thrown in the deep end. So it did feel like that. But I think it just comes back to what I was saying before about only on reflection, and the same talking to my brother and sister now. And I was the eldest, and I was the one who got in more trouble, and on a public level suffered more and talked about it more. But they've now reflecting and looking at, oh, this really has and did affect them in so many ways as as well. So you don't really realize a lot of it until you are able to look back. And I can see now, a lot of these obsessive behaviors was because I didn't feel in control, and using sport as a way to feel in control, and whatever it was that I was doing. And I think the people pleasing is something that myself and my siblings all developed, and that stemmed, I think, from growing up again in these developmental years, knowing that you've got to uphold the family name, and if you do this or don't do this, it could reflect that way. And that's not from bad parenting, that's just politics of how it is. But it creates a horrible feeling that I still fight off this day to this day, where you feel like, well, I want to be able to, if I make a fool of myself or do something stupid, I want that to be reflecting on me, and I can own that. But I don't want it to be a thing where now I feel guilt and shame because it's reflecting on the family. But unfortunately, in that environment, that's what happens. And, that's why I moved overseas as well, because it sort of traumatized me. And it's something that to this, I'll probably never fully be able to, you know, get past, but I've come a long way and, you work on it, but it's something that's so deeply ingrained where, you've been programmed in this way. So,
Mm.
yeah, a lot of things that came out of it.
I'm interested to know. So you talk about obviously moving to then New York. Was that, as you said, sort of a way for you to get away from it all, to almost become your own self, find your own self, and really separate yourself from that world that you were living in?
Yeah, it was, but I was very conscious of not doing it in a way of like trying to run away because I had this feeling for such a long time. I always probably through my 20s where I was like, I just want to wish I could just get out of here and escape and whatever. But, I was still very much lost. My own mental health wasn't in a good way. I didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't have a path. So, when I started finding that and working on myself, I really kept saying to myself, well, until I sort of establish myself to a degree where I feel pretty clear on the path I'm on, and I'm, in a good enough mental space to then go and make a move like that. I want to wait until that point. So I waited until my early 30s and um, ended up moving to Vancouver in Canada for a little bit. I got a 2-year visa there. Then I won the green card because I was over there doing like auditioning for acting roles, and a lot of my acting friends from Australia were trying to get the green card in the lottery every year, and they never got it. And I put my name in, and then luckily won it the first time. So I thought, okay, I'll go to New York now and give it a go there, and then I've been here ever since. So it was sort of, I mean, I love Australia and I miss home and I go back a lot and probably will end up living there again at some point. And it wasn't leaving in a sense of, you know, people are sort of noticing, my dad was premier a long time ago now. It's not like people are all, it's not like a relevant thing anymore. People still do in Melbourne, notice me or notice my dad and talk about it, but not to the degree it was. It's more a psychological thing of Melbourne, my whole life there, it's just so intrinsically linked with all of these things growing up, where it's just a reminder, and I find it very hard to feel like my own person. So it really has helped in that way leaving, because you come over here and no one knows what the Premier of Victoria means, let alone who my dad is. So it's kind of refreshing to feel like, okay, I can just be myself, continue doing what I'm doing, and yeah, go from there.
And just a small guy in a big world, whereas in Australia, it's like you're a big person in such a small world. No, I really feel that. And then obviously speaking a bit about, you mentioned, you developed anxiety and depression. Did you know at the time what that was, or like what was happening within you when you were feeling that way?
No, I definitely didn't, and it's why I, really to this day, I've dedicated myself to trying to help in that area. As you mentioned earlier, especially with men, because I think a lot of the time men don't talk about it. And, I was one of them where I knew something wasn't right. And I've always, since I was very young, I've had, compulsive behavior and obsessive mind, had anxiety, whole lot of things. And it's probably part of it's my programming. I got diagnosed with ADHD like a couple of years ago, which that's been a huge relief. And that's a whole nother story where I was, I saw probably 20 psychologists through my 20s. And I was saying, there's got to be something not right here. Like my mind's bloody, please tell me, and couldn't get an answer. And my girlfriend is a neuroscientist and she's got ADHD. And within the first month of dating her, she said to me, like observing my behavior, she's like, if you don't fucking have ADHD, then I'll be shocked because you're the worst I've ever seen. And she helped me um, get a get an evaluation and ended up getting
Great
medicated
girlfriend
for it.
advice, just as you meet her.
You're fucking crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I got medication for it and I got help, and it has made, and this has only been in the last couple of years, but it made a dramatic difference because I've worked on myself in so many areas. But then I was like, there's something not right. I can't, my mind is like jumping, and and I've seen it in so many people, but it really did make a difference. But Anyway, I sort of went on a tangent there. I can't remember what
The
was I answering?
ADHD kicked in.
Yeah, I know.
um,
I'm like tired today, so my mind is like that. It actually does get
um,
worse when I'm tired.
yeah, I love it. It's so good.
Oh my God.
We'll talk about anxiety and depression and how understanding
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
feelings and sort of inside your body and if you knew what it was.
Yeah, so I knew the behaviors that came out of that, and as
Mm.
and my parents were worried about me because as like I was saying, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, I would be hiding bricks under my bed, getting up at like 3 in the morning, training for hours upon hours before school, things that didn't make sense. And it was just this obsession that something in my head, it was like an addiction where my brain was telling me, you have to do more and more and more and more and more. And it wasn't even, I knew logically it wasn't even helping with my performance when I was competing. And I was competing in middle distance running at the time. But there was some obsessions. I knew it was completely off. Like it's not normal behavior. I didn't know why. And when I eventually, I guess that got channeled into the drinking, where again, it was as soon as I started drinking, and I didn't start drinking until I was 18, but almost overnight that became my version of self-medicating because it was the only time I felt peace that I could turn my brain off when I just got drunk to the point where I couldn't think anymore, and led to obviously so many bad situations. But it wasn't until I finally went and had to see a psychologist and found out how much help I needed and how severely depressed, and got told examples about that, and all those sorts of things. And then myself at that time feeling shame about it, feeling embarrassed, feeling like as a man you're not meant to, that's weak. And I was scared to tell my friends about it and talk about it. But it took me down that path, and yeah, it's sort of from that personal experience and how much it's helped my own life. I've just have to remind myself all the time, because I've done thousands of talks, and I've got a podcast as well, and I'm trying to put these messages out there. And sometimes you almost forget. Like I'll go and do a talk and think, hang on, I'm just saying the same sort of stuff. Is this actually helping? But then you hear back, and you might hear from one person from that talk that went and got help from it, and you're like, well, you know what? Like if one person went and got help, that's changed my life. So that's actually, if that's all that comes out of it, that's worth it. So it sort of really, it reminds you how critical it is that people are suffering, people don't know what to do.
And I think a lot of people, when you talk about, there can be diagnoses and things like that, but a lot of people do get confused with, is this something where there's something not right with me, or is this just normal behavior? And I think it's really important to touch on those lines because a lot of people can have a lot of addictive traits and obsessive traits, but think like that's just normal. Like I'm just a hustler, or this
Mhm.
is part of the culture, or this is the messaging we're receiving, to get up and to go and to be busy. But where does the line draw? Like, where is the difference between something being an unhealthy behavior and something actually being just normal?
I think that's such a good question because like there's such a blurred line. I don't think there's an answer in the sense of like there's any right equation for that. But I think where that line is doing, actually working on yourself and being able to gain that knowledge to gain more self-awareness so that you at least then can know, okay, these are the behavior patterns. And even if I'm not going to completely change them, I understand why I'm doing it. And, I've got so many friends, especially in New York. This is such a fast-paced city. Everyone's competing. Friends that are, working in finance, that are entrepreneurs, that are highly successful, worth in the hundreds of millions. But you go and talk to them, you watch their behavior, and they're clearly running away from something. They're out drinking, drugs, working nonstop. You try and talk about, you're hearing about all these personal problems. You try and talk to them about that, and they can't acknowledge what's actually happening, and they don't
Mm.
have the education in the mental health side of things. And it's almost like when you reach success in things, you think, and society tells you that you must, have all the answers to everything. So you probably don't need to know that. So it can actually be worse if you don't learn about this stuff before you have success, because you're less likely to go and get the help. So anyway, my long-winded answer to that would be, I think it's as simple as everyone needs to be educated about this, and we need to learn about ourselves. So, within the chaos of life, we can, it's a daily thing where you need to be monitoring yourself, and, no 2 days are the same often. So as long as you can see, okay, I'm getting a bit I've gone a bit too obsessive in that area, or I'm, not giving myself enough time out, or I'm isolating myself, or I'm working too much, or, whatever it is, be able to identify that and take the steps to do it. Because if you don't take those steps, it just compounds. And, that's when people eventually, get in a hole, burnout, self-harm, all those sort of things.
How do you do that in a world that has a lot of noise and a lot of people telling you when to do things, how to do things, how to think, how to act? How do you actually be able to listen to yourself and know what your self needs?
It's such a good question as well. And I think, again, no clear answer to that. But I think that's probably the biggest problem that we face in the modern world, where, in my podcast at the end, I ask a few of the same closing questions every time. One of them is, what do you think is the biggest burden on mental health in society currently? And I'd say probably 99% of guests have said social media, because, we're just glued to this stuff and we don't get off our phones. We're comparing ourselves to other people. Our life might actually be working, but we want more, and we're told we should have more. And more doesn't mean happier. I always have felt my happiest when I keep my life incredibly simple, and I often don't achieve that. I'll add extra things and overcompensate. But then when I do get in that place where I'm grounded and I keep it simple, that's the time where I feel at peace. And I think, again, it comes down to the education, comes down to knowing yourself really well, knowing what your goals are, and then having good people around you. So and trying to create a routine, and be strict enough about that you sort of know, okay, well, this is what I'm working towards, this is when I'm doing that, this is my time out, this is, you've got to curate that life for yourself, which I think is a difficult thing, because the way I think we make a lot of change in this is educating each individual to do that. But that's on a mass level, without billions and billions of dollars behind it. It's a very difficult thing to do. So it's tough. But I think we obviously, I love what you're doing, and putting these messages out there. Anyone that's doing it, we literally can't have enough of these conversations. So I think it's at least one thing we can be doing, just really trying to educate, trying to provide tools and resources on on as many levels as we can.
And I think the most difficult thing as well is there is a lot of conversation around this space now compared to what there used to be. There's definitely a lot more around mental health. There's a lot more around mental illness and really how you can support your young person as well as yourself. Yet we still struggle to implement it in our daily lives. And we talk about that we need to do this, or we don't have time to do this, and we don't prioritize it until we're in crisis. Then we
Mm.
look for help. Then we look for support. Then we throw our hands in the air and we're like, we just want anything. Why do you think we lack the initiative to really implement grounding techniques, to really get out into nature, to really honor ourselves in the preventative stages rather than just waiting for crisis time?
I love these questions, because these are all the things I talk about, and totally agree with what you're saying. And I think that's the biggest problem, that we don't have, enough preventative practical solutions out there. There's a lot of theoretical solutions. And as you're saying, there's a lot of reactive stuff, which I think Australia has probably done better than almost anywhere in the world. We're far ahead of America after living here. They've got a long way to go in that conversation.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, on a preventative level, I think the biggest thing is everything's become overcomplicated and overwhelming. And, it doesn't need to be. It's become another version of capitalism, and in the sense of, you need to make this much money and achieve this and do that and climb this ladder, and you want to look after your well-being. Well, you've got to go and do Pilates and meditate and do some crazy diet and blah 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 blah. And it's like, people would look at that, and if you're not, I mean, even me, I look after my wellness exercise, but if I look at all these things you should and could do, I'll be overwhelmed and be like, fuck that, I can't do it. So I think just absolutely simplifying the shit out of everything is the way to do it. Do just one thing. What the hell, and it's actually with my company, we Move Your Mind is the name of my company, and we do a lot of work in organizations with programs, and trying to educate on mental health and provide resources. But uh, I'm sort of angling it now where to purely around fitness and just using movement and exercise, really simple things anyone can do anywhere, to with the sole purpose of helping your mental health, and trying to really create these programs for people where they don't have to do anything else. It's just like, just do this, nothing else, and you can, increase it as you go. Because for me, that's really helped. I meditate occasionally, and I used to do it a lot, but really for me, exercise is, what grounds me. It is meditative when I'm doing it because I'm not thinking about other things. I feel great after. It's obviously good for you, and everything else. So it doesn't have to be that, but from what I'm doing, that's one example of why I'm doing that, in the sense of people are overwhelmed. Well, okay, just do this one thing. Find one simple thing. Forget everything else. You don't need to do it all, and you shouldn't. You should just find what works for you in all areas of life. So it's hard. It's like life's so unnecessarily complicated.
Mm. Unnecessary, complicated, and so noisy that it can be, yeah, very hard to navigate what you want in your life. And I think that's really important as well. What you really touched on is like finding what works for you, because I think there is a lot, as you said, a lot of boxes you can tick, a lot of different areas you can jump into. Sometimes like meditation might not work for someone, but there might be a breath work that might work for someone, or a yoga practice, or you might want to do strength training, like finding something that does work in alignment with you. And I think it's really important that you go on that journey, though. I think that's the first thing. And as you said, it's just starting with one thing. Um, how do we teach this to young people, though? Because
Mm.
an adult with a fully developed frontal lobe, yep, I can see that they can definitely take on this message and be open to that conversation. But for a young person, how do they take on this message? How do they navigate what they like, when half the time they don't even know what they want to eat, they don't even know what they want to do with their life. So thinking about in terms of self-care, how are they
Yeah.
going to be able to take on this message?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're doing more, programs in schools, but like you're saying, there's probably only so much they'll take on. Um, but I think in general, it's about how we, communicate in society, how we, you know, parent our kids, and these generational things that have been passed down. And, for most people, these negative behavior patterns are coming from an overcompensation for things that have happened in your past, how you've been programmed. So if your parents have been avoidant, if they haven't been emotionally open with you, if they haven't, done all these different things, they've done their best job. But they've actually just, presented you with what they've been taught. They're giving you everything that they have. Um, you're going to then probably overcompensate in other areas to try and find what you felt like you lacked and missed out on. So if we can learn, I think when society becomes more educated in these areas and we actually start putting this into practice, organically we'll, be more open with how we raise our kids. Obviously, still make mistakes, but be able to raise them to be more emotionally open. I think is probably one of the biggest ones, and to understand that it's okay. You don't have to. There's no right or wrong. You don't have to be this or that, and you don't have to be how your parents are. You're an individual, and I think that's where a lot of anxiety and depression comes from, because it's always about should. I should do this. I've got more opportunity if I go and do this course, and that'll make my parents happy, but it makes me miserable. But I should do it because that's the right thing to do. It's like, well, why is it the right thing to do? It's not what you want to do. You're not going to become the best version of yourself, so you probably shouldn't actually do that. You should do, find what it is that you actually want to do. So I think, it comes down to the societal part of it. It comes down to, I think, the schooling system needs to, be drastically changed, and it's good it's changing a little bit, but it's archaic. It's a system that was built, I don't know, like 50 years ago, or probably longer. It's like, well,
Mm.
look at how much the world's changed in the last like 5, 10 years, let alone the last 50 years. So I think it needs so many things need an overhaul in the world, but and it probably will happen over time, but we need, yeah, to be just changing those conversations.
Mm. Yeah, I feel it. It is slowly changing. It's sometimes it's, I think with anything that is good, there is that counter argument that isn't great. And that's what I think we're seeing as well on social media is there is this positive mental health practice message that is coming about. But then we do step into some, oh, I hate the term influencers, but we're going to roll with it because what other term that we have and are really pushing a message of what mental health should be and should look like. Sorry, I want your opinion in terms of the social media influencers out there that are pushing the healthy lifestyles, that are pushing this is how I honor my mental health and have the followers, have the likes. Should we be following? Are they all positive or should the conversation really be shifting?
Well, I think it's a lot of it's incredibly negative and, sending a message. I mean, that's the thing. We don't even know with like kids that are like I'm 37 now and I grew up with I didn't have social media, but I just missed it. And we don't know what these kids that are growing up with it, in 10, 20, 30 years, what does that lead to? Because it's pretty severe what it does psychologically. And if you're looking at, it's all garbage. It's like, I think the message is good if it's positive and it educates people. The rest is absolute crap. Like, who cares about how many followers or likes you have? It doesn't actually mean anything. I mean, if you can use that to get a good message out to your followers and build a community and help them, then that's great. But it's not something to aspire to in this sense of I need to be Instagram famous or whatever it is. It's become like, I mean, there's always been that thing, I guess, in the world that people want to be famous, and originally it's movie stars, and it's like the Kardashians, and I want to be a reality star and find a quick fix to do it that way, get rich quick schemes. And now it's, I want to be an influencer. I want to be Instagram famous. I want to be a YouTuber or whatever. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing to become that. It's actually opened up a whole new, pathway. But I think there's so many mixed messages and, negativity that can come out of it. And it can sway people from, doing things that they really want to do. And I think a lot of the influencers are, some of them are really good. Some are probably peddling out messages they don't actually believe in because they're just doing what they think they need to do for their brand or whatever. And I think that has a shelf life and probably won't, work if you do it that way anyway. You got to be authentic to yourself. But I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot of negatives.
And I think one of the big things that I see as well on social media platforms is we really emphasize on this highlight reel that there is no journey, there is no hard work, there's this instantaneous result where you need to be at your peak 24/7. And I think
Yeah.
this pushes a drive then for not just young people, but anyone to the minute that you feel sad, to the minute that you feel anxious, to the minute that your day's not going so great comparing it to hundreds of millions of people that are just showing all the positive and you feel like, well, you're shit. And like something's
Oh, it's
wrong with
shocking.
you because you might just
Yeah.
have one bad day. And sometimes, you might not have anxiety, you might not have depression. It might just be a bad day. Yet we have all these labels now. And I feel that this overwhelming sense of content in your face is really making a lot of us I think, sick in a way that we don't even know that we are. And I think as well, it is increasing a lot of mental ill health. Um, but underneath it all, it's like this conversation where no, guys, it's like we're focusing on mental health and it's positive messaging and it's all about health and well-being when it's like this toxicity beneath all of it.
Oh, and if you look at the studies, it shows how bad it is. And exactly like you're saying, where, and I fall into this all the time because if in an ideal world, I wouldn't use social media at all, but I'm using it to, for a lot of my work. And then I get stuck, looking at it, then I'll compare myself to other things. And then you catch yourself doing it, you think, why am I doing this? This isn't helping, but it's just like so addictive. Yeah, but like you're saying, it's comparing the worst part of your life to the highlight reel of this curated highlight reel that's maybe 1% of that person's life, where if you actually went behind the scenes, it wouldn't look good at all. They're just showing if everyone just shows their highlights, everything looks great. But we're comparing the worst parts of our lives to that. And that's a recipe to make yourself unhappy. So, comparison is the thief of joy, is what they say. And I think it really is. You could have, I mean, you see it with people that are incredibly successful celebrities that have all the money they need, that, are famous, have access to all these different things. And some of them are the most depressed people you could ever meet because they're comparing and they're chasing this elusive thing that doesn't exist. You can't really ever be at peace with yourself. So it's so hard because the society has created this for us, and we're all addicted to it, or so many of us are. So it's a crazy thing.
And we're all just subscribing to it. I mean, it's great that we have these conversations. As you said, I'm the same. I'm like, if in an ideal world, I would not have the platform, but in saying that, it's a great sort of platform that you can share your message and really be part of, or pave your way to create a positive environment for that one person, as you said, that might just see a message or hear something. And I do want to touch a little bit on, because I think there is a difference, but yet we don't talk about it a lot, and a lot of people don't understand. But the difference in what mental health is and mental ill health, because I think people put it under one banner when it's not. And that's where I think the lack of people seeking help in like crisis mode, and then
Yeah.
people seeking preventative help, it's that you do daily practices for mental health, but then mental
Mm.
ill health, it's like, oh, only when I'm mentally sick, that's when I start putting in the practices. But I think that definition is not clear, and I'm interested to see what your opinion is on the difference between the two.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's, yeah, because in general, and I found that really difficult with, Move Your Mind and the work that I'm doing, when you're getting these messages out there and trying to educate people. And a lot of what I'm focused on doing with my company is preventative work. And a lot of that involves more holistic sort of stuff. It's, if you want, it's probably more just wellness, daily things you can do, but it's packaged around mental health, which makes people think that, okay, that is kind of taboo and something that I should, only go to, like you said, if I'm really suffering. But really, the idea is, even if your life's going well, we can all improve our mental well-being. Like it might be that just from exercising, from meditating, from just taking a step back and looking at your life and thinking, am I overworking myself? Maybe do I need to go and have a chat to my boss and see if I can um, you know sort of rejig my hours, or whatever it is, like working on all of those things. And then on the actual mental ill health, I guess that's the side when, if things are at a crisis point and you're not coping and you need that help, then you need to know what to do, and you should immediately get help if you're not coping. But ideally, what we're doing is focusing on the mental health part, where before, we're being preventative, we're being holistic, and creating all of these behavior patterns to look after ourselves, not just for the purpose of avoiding getting to the mental ill health part, but actually just to improve our life. You're going to probably perform better at work, you're going to be happier, you're going to be more at peace, have better relationships, you're going to feel better, have more energy, all sorts of things. So I think it's just something that it'll make anyone's life better if we focus on it.
Do you think that there is a formula? Because I know we all want the magic pill and the formula and the checkbox and the list, but a formula or a checklist that everybody should implement every day to really honor their mental health?
I definitely don't think there's a formula, and I think everyone's so different. I think the formula is really just talking about it. Being the formula for an individual is being honest with yourself, really being authentic, which is the hardest thing to do. It's like so hard. I find that really hard, and I'm not honest with myself all the time about so many different things. And again, my girlfriend is great in that area, where she's always calling me out on and challenging me, and it's helped me grow in that area. But it's frustrating. You want to, punch a hole in the wall sometimes when you're having to confront these things. But yeah, the formula would be just thinking about it and thinking, okay, what's one thing I can do today that it's going to help in with my mental well-being, and or just with my health in general, just one thing. And I think if you think that every day, you'll start to develop a habit where it just becomes part of your life. And I think habits are so important. You make these things so ingrained in your day-to-day life that it becomes, again, like exercise for me is like sleep. Every day, no matter what happens in my day, I know I'll be either going for a run or going to the gym or doing some form of exercise, because I don't think about it. It's just what I do. And it's part of, what keeps me grounded and feel, clear and feeling good in life. So I think finding your version of that, and on a very small level, if you haven't done it before, just every day, what's one tiny thing I can do towards that until it becomes, part of your just ingrained in your life, I think would be one of the things, I guess, if there was a formula that I'd recommend.
Mm. I quickly do want to touch on, you did mention at the start about like the start of this conversation about honesty and being true to yourself. And I know as a woman, and I can only come from that perspective, that we probably are more open to conversations about talking about our feelings because as women, we create that environment with friends. Talking is a big thing. Um, but from a male's perspective, can I ask what goes through your head in terms of, like you did mention, you just want to punch a wall or you just want to aggressively get something out? What is that void or what is that wall that prevents you guys? What goes on during your head when you think like that you can't talk about something, where you can't be vulnerable? Like what is that messaging and dialogue that prevents you from doing that?
I think a lot of it's shame. Like, so a feeling of, deep shame that you're not meant to talk about certain things, that if you do talk about certain things, maybe people will abandon you or it might lead to a negative outcome. I mean, every example is different, but I think a lot of those core things are what, can happen for men. And for me, as well, has happened a lot where there'll be things ingrained from my past where I've had a real barrier with being honest about certain things or authentic about things and open about it, and there's just such a fear, and when you eventually get through it you realize, well, nothing bad happened. It actually built more intimacy if it's something, with the girlfriend or whatever the situation is. But I think it's just things that are so ingrained and that, societal thing we're talking about, and a lot of the time men react with anger because it's like sort of, the go-to emotion if you're blocking yourself from being vulnerable, because we don't, again, we feel a lot of the time um, scared and embarrassed about showing emotion. And I know for me, I've gotten better where I can cry sometimes. But in the past, I've been, even watching a movie by myself and something emotional will happen. I'm moved by it and I'll find myself tearing up a little bit. And instantly, I'll, without even knowing it, I'll recognize it and feel this shame and embarrassment and stop myself from doing it. And no one's even there. But it's just this thing of like feeling like this is embarrassing to show emotion and especially to cry. So it's a crazy thing because like when you do, if you do cry, for example, it's so relieving. It's such a release. And it's I've got friends who have said to me they, haven't cried for 20 years or, longer, like since they were like 10 years old. So um yeah, I think it's just stuff that is so ingrained that it's really hard to get past.
And I think as well, a lot of us, no matter what gender you are, we run from that discomfort the minute things feel uncomfortable or uneasy. It's like, oh, quick, get away from that.
Yeah.
Which is hard, is definitely hard, and I don't say that it's easy for anyone, no matter what sex or like gender you are, absolutely. But this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for jumping on. I do want to end on a couple of quick questions. Mine are random. They just come with whatever feels right. But my first one is, you talk about your company and what you're doing, which is absolutely incredible, the work that you're doing and really paving the way in this space. I love to say it is like the groundwork, the people that are in working on the ground with the people and trying to, as you said, work in that preventative space, which I think is just so needed. But if you were attending your own program and someone called Nick came in and he was going to facilitate a workshop or a program that you do today, what would you take out of your own program?
The main thing I would take out of it, which, I get this from people all the time, daily when I'm hearing other people tell me their story, is just the feeling of permission that, you know, I'm sure there would be something I'd relate. Well, obviously, if I heard my own story, but there'd be a few things that I'd relate to. But in general, if I heard someone's story that I related to, maybe related to one of the things they're talking about, the biggest thing for me would be that feeling of relief of oh, I'm hearing this other person talk about this. And, I have this thing that I'm, struggling with as well. And I always tell myself that I'm a piece of shit and I'm weak and there's something wrong with me because everyone else copes. And why do I struggle more than them? And then when you realize, and I have this a lot with my friends as well, a lot of my male friends where traditionally we haven't talked about these kind of things. When we do open up with each other, you feel this release of, oh, like I didn't, you seemed like you had everything together. Like you've never told me that you had these problems you're dealing with daily. And okay, wow, like I feel, you know, empathy for you, but also relief that I'm not going to judge myself as much now because I've been struggling with, half of these things you're talking about. And I think since I did my first talk 15 years ago, or whenever it was, really the one thing that I did when I didn't know what I was doing then was just sharing a story. And that's probably even to this day, out of all the work I'm doing, the storytelling, whether it's my story, someone else's, hearing, I think that's to me the most powerful way to get through to people.
Oh, I got goosebumps. I love the idea of storytelling because I think that's how we learn and that's how we create and that's how we become our unique selves. And as you find connections through that and being able to relate to people. And it is, I feel, something that is really lacking in today's generation because of social media and the digital age. It's that one-on-one connection that we'd rather subscribe to it online rather than face to face, and that's really difficult. But in saying
Yeah.
that, in terms of a question revolving around that, what do you think society's one downfall is at the moment?
I mean, there's so many, but I would say the biggest downfall is probably, the thing that we talked about with, social media, with peddling out these, you know, messages that you need to do more, be more, that you're not enough, comparison, all of that sort of thing. I think it's out of control and it's kind of terrifying, where the world's going because it seems like it's only amplifying and with AI and everything else, hopefully at some point it, reaches a tipping point where things get reset a bit and or we find, that we have to manage it better or we learn how to deal with it. But the way it's going, that end point doesn't seem like it's in sight at all. It's only getting more extreme. And I think that's, for it affects me a lot, affects every single person, I know and that I've talked to. And I think it's there's a lot of good that comes out of it, but it's just overwhelming and really bad for your mental health and something needs to change with it, I think. So I'd say that's probably the biggest one.
Mm. Two more before I let you off the hook.
Okay.
Um, Second last one. In terms of what working in this space, what does this space give you in terms of a feeling, and why do you love working within the mental health sort of sector?
Um, it gives me purpose, really. And I guess like it was what I was struggling with. And the purpose that got me out of that was the purpose of building this sort of mantra in my mind of in some way I'm just going to dedicate myself to helping in this area. So it makes me feel like I'm doing something. I know it's not changing everything, but I'm, if I look back, I'm proud of what I've done and feel like, okay, I'm like doing something that I think genuinely helps in a small way. And also makes me feel good because I think I always say this actually, we should look at this stuff selfishly. If I go and do a talk, I'll walk out of there buzzing myself and it makes me feel on a high because, you know, you're um seeing, this message help other people and it makes you feel good and it's cathartic and all these sorts of things. So if I feel good out of it, why not be selfish about trying to do it to feel that way if the byproduct's helping other people? So I think that's probably, the biggest one.
That's great. I love that. And then one word to describe your mental health practice.
My personal mental health practice,
Yeah.
I would say exercise.
Okay.
Probably
And
if it was
why?
one word.
Mm,
Why?
mm,
It's the biggest part of my life. It's, I was training to be a professional athlete. It's all I wanted to do with my life when I was younger, and I've kept training my whole life. And it's probably the time every day where I feel, most at peace. I look forward to it. It grounds me. It just, it's helped me in every way possible. And yeah, it's just my favorite thing to do. I love to train.
I love it.
Um,
So good. It
yeah.
is. And it is. Well, the way that you like anyone, if they move their body, I think it's one of those things where it can get you out of your head and into your physical, where I think that is so important when it is really chaotic and crazy up in your mind. You feel like you can't find any sense of it. It's like ground yourself by like getting yourself back into your physical body. And I think it is something that we don't talk about, those positive effects of it much. It's a lot of, as you said, physical and results and outcome, but what it actually does for yourself, I think is phenomenal. So great word.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Secret Sunday Session podcast. It has been such a privilege to have you on. Where can people find you if they want to jump on board, bring you along to facilitate a program? Where can they find you?
Yeah, and thank you for having me on. I love all your questions and love what you're doing. So, really enjoyed it. If people want to find me, they can go on Instagram's probably the main social media one. Talking about social media, maybe don't go on Instagram, but if you do go on there, it's just Nick Bracks. My website's nickbracks.com. And on there you can find sort of my podcast, book, the work that I'm doing, links to other things. That's probably the easiest sort of starting point to go to.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you so much once again for jumping on all the way from New York. Pleasure. It feels like I'm half there, so I've half been to New York. And thank you as well to everyone else out there for joining us for another Secret Sunday session. We'll catch you guys all next time.
Able bodies, but then like at times I feel like